I thought she wanted advice, but she wanted me. The first time she came into my life, I thought it was simple, a matter of advice. She walked in with the confidence of someone used to being listened to, the sort of poise that only comes from years of experience. Yet there was something more in the way she carried herself, a subtle gravity that drew my attention before I even realized it. She was in her early 40s, graceful and understated, with a presence that seemed to fill the room without trying. Her smile was warm but not casual. It lingered, as if she were inviting me into a private corner of her world. She asked for my opinion on something that seemed trivial at first, a problem I could solve with a few words, maybe a suggestion or two. But the moment we started talking, I noticed how she watched me, really watched me, in a way that made me suddenly aware of every gesture, every inflection in my voice. Her eyes held a spark of curiosity, but also something softer, almost hesitant, like she was measuring whether I could see beyond the surface. I remember the handshake first, a polite but firm greeting. The warmth of her hand lingered just a moment too long, and I found myself noticing the subtle tension in her fingers, the faint pressure that seemed almost deliberate. There was a scent, soft, floral, not overpowering but unforgettable, and I caught it as she leaned slightly forward to show me a document. That simple closeness sent an unexpected ripple through me, a quiet awareness I wasn't expecting. We moved to sit across from each other, and for a moment, it was just the sound of our voices filling the room. She had a way of speaking that made me want to lean in, to listen more carefully than I ever had. Every word, every pause, felt layered with meaning. I tried to focus on the advice she was asking for, but I couldn't ignore the way her knee brushed against mine under the table, the almost imperceptible tilt of her head when she considered what I said. There was a warmth in the air, subtle and unspoken, that made the simplest interaction feel loaded with potential. I left that day thinking I had been of help, that it was just another polite encounter between a young man and an experienced woman. But that thought, so neat and rational, crumbled the moment she smiled at me as she walked out the door. There was something in that smile, something that suggested she hadn't come for advice at all. She had come for a connection, one I hadn't expected but suddenly couldn't ignore. The audience should feel it too, the quiet, simmering tension in ordinary gestures, the electricity that can exist in a single handshake, a glance, a pause. This part sets the stage for a story where everything seems normal, yet underneath, desire and curiosity are quietly taking root. It's the spark before the fire, the moment where professional distance begins to blur, and where both of us, and the viewers, begin to sense that this encounter will change more than just the advice she came for. After that first meeting, I couldn't stop thinking about her. There was a subtle magnetism in the way she moved, the tilt of her head, the soft cadence of her voice. I thought I understood the situation. She wanted advice, I could give it, but as our next encounter began, I realized how wrong I had been. This time, the setting was more intimate, quieter. She invited me over to her home, or maybe I suggested it. But either way, the atmosphere shifted the moment I stepped inside. It was no longer a formal exchange. It was something warmer, personal, and alive. We sat side by side, not across from each other this time. I noticed the slight closeness immediately, the way her shoulder nearly brushed mine. My chest tightened as I felt the accidental heat of that proximity. We were discussing the same issue as before, but it didn't matter anymore. I found myself listening more to the rhythm of her breathing, the soft inflections in her laughter, the way her hand rested lightly on the table before her. I wanted to reach out, to touch her arm, but I hesitated, afraid of breaking some invisible boundary. Then, without warning, it happened. Her hand brushed mine, not deliberately, I think, but the electricity of it made my fingers tingle. I felt my pulse quicken. It was the kind of touch that lingers in the mind far longer than the actual sensation, a whisper of something unspoken. She didn't pull away. Instead, she let it happen, and in that small permission, the air between us seemed to hum with possibility. Her eyes caught mine in a way that made the room shrink around us. She smiled, a little softer, a little more vulnerable than before. I noticed the subtle rise and fall of her chest as she laughed at something I said, and I realized I was memorizing every detail. The curve of her jaw, the soft warmth of her hand on the table, the way her hair fell across her shoulders. Every gesture felt intentional, yet natural, as though we were stepping into an uncharted intimacy neither of us had planned. There was a moment when I reached for a notebook to jot something down, and our elbows bumped. I could feel the warmth of her skin through the fabric, a fleeting contact that sent a shiver up my arm. I wanted to linger, to see if she felt it too, but I was careful, respectful. Yet the tension remained, unspoken but undeniable. The audience should feel this growing closeness, the pull of two people who are aware of each other in ways beyond words. The first spark of a slow-burn romance is here, simmering in every accidental touch, every shared glance, every pause that stretches a little too long. We are no longer merely advisor and client. We are two people navigating the edges of desire, curiosity, and human connection. By the end of this part, viewers should feel it. The story isn't about advice anymore. It's about attention, attraction, and the magnetic pull of someone who seems to notice and understand you in ways no one else does. This first real encounter lays the foundation for the tension and emotional intimacy that will define everything to come. After that first close encounter, I found myself haunted by the memory of her presence. It wasn't just the way her hand had brushed mine or the warmth of her shoulder against mine. It was the way she had looked at me, as if she were seeing something no one else had noticed. And yet, I couldn't ignore the voice in my head. She's older. This is complicated. What would people think? Every rational thought battled with the growing pull I felt, a quiet, insistent tension I couldn't shake. I spent the following days replaying our moments together, the way her laugh had lingered in the room, the way her eyes had met mine without embarrassment or hesitation. I caught myself imagining her in small, intimate scenarios, handing me a cup of coffee, leaning over to show me a note, the accidental brush of her fingers. Each memory felt alive, warm under my skin, stirring something I wasn't prepared to confront. Meanwhile, she revealed fragments of herself I hadn't expected. In conversation, she shared a story of loneliness, a regret, a fear that she didn't often voice. It was subtle, layered, yet entirely raw. I found myself wanting to soothe her, to reassure her that she wasn't alone. But with every word she spoke, I became more aware of the distance we had yet to navigate, the age difference, the social expectations, the unspoken rules that hovered between us. And still, the attraction grew, silent but undeniable. There were moments when our conversations stretched into pauses, moments thick with unspoken meaning. She would glance at me, hesitating, a subtle curl of her lips, a tilt of her head, as if daring me to read the spaces between her words. And I did. I read everything. Every flicker of her expression, every soft inhale, every tremor in her tone spoke volumes. I realized I was no longer offering advice alone. I was learning her, exploring the nuances of her presence, and discovering how deeply I wanted to be part of her world. Even ordinary moments became charged with possibility. The soft hum of traffic outside, the warmth of a shared coffee cup between our hands, the quiet tick of a clock. We noticed them all, because in those small details, we were noticing each other. My mind ached with questions I couldn't ask aloud. Does she feel this too? Is it just me imagining it? The audience should feel this internal struggle, the tension between desire and reason, attraction and hesitation. This part is about the slow-building awareness that something extraordinary is happening, something that defies labels or convenience. It's about the magnetic pull of two people, each aware of the other's presence in ways both terrifying and thrilling. By the end of this segment, viewers should feel the narrator's conflicted heart, the hesitations, the longing, and the emotional weight of realizing that what began as advice is becoming something far more profound. This is the moment where the slow burn starts to glow, where every glance, every brush of touch, carries meaning far beyond the surface. The story has moved beyond the mundane. It has become intimate, emotional, and irresistibly compelling. After that first close encounter, I found myself haunted by the memory of her presence. It wasn't just the way her hand had brushed mine or the warmth of her shoulder against mine. It was the way she had looked at me, as if she were seeing something no one else had noticed. And yet, I couldn't ignore the voice in my head. She's older. This is complicated. What would people think? Every rational thought battled with the growing pull I felt, a quiet, insistent tension I couldn't shake. I spent the following days replaying our moments together, the way her laugh had lingered in the room, the way her eyes had met mine without embarrassment or hesitation. I caught myself imagining her in small, intimate scenarios, handing me a cup of coffee, leaning over to show me a note, the accidental brush of her fingers. Each memory felt alive, warm under my skin, stirring something I wasn't prepared to confront. Meanwhile, she revealed fragments of herself I hadn't expected. In conversation, she shared a story of loneliness, a regret, a fear that she didn't often voice. It was subtle, layered, yet entirely raw. I found myself wanting to soothe her, to reassure her that she wasn't alone. But with every word she spoke, I became more aware of the distance we had yet to navigate, the age difference, the social expectations, the unspoken rules that hovered between us. And still, the attraction grew, silent but undeniable. There were moments when our conversations stretched into pauses, moments thick with unspoken meaning. She would glance at me, hesitating, a subtle curl of her lips, a tilt of her head, as if daring me to read the spaces between her words. And I did. I read everything. Every flicker of her expression, every soft inhale, every tremor in her tone spoke volumes. I realized I was no longer offering advice alone. I was learning her, exploring the nuances of her presence, and discovering how deeply I wanted to be part of her world. Even ordinary moments became charged with possibility. The soft hum of traffic outside, the warmth of a shared coffee cup between our hands, the quiet tick of a clock. We noticed them all, because in those small details, we were noticing each other. My mind ached with questions I couldn't ask aloud. Does she feel this too? Is it just me imagining it? The audience should feel this internal struggle, the tension between desire and reason, attraction and hesitation. This part is about the slow building awareness that something extraordinary is happening, something that defies labels or convenience. It's about the magnetic pull of two people, each aware of the other's presence in ways both terrifying and thrilling. By the end of this segment, viewers should feel the narrator's conflicted heart, the hesitations, the longing, and the emotional weight of realizing that what began as advice is becoming something far more profound. This is the moment where the slow burn starts to glow, where every glance, every brush of touch, carries meaning far beyond the surface. The story has moved beyond the mundane. It has become intimate, emotional, and irresistibly compelling. After that first confession, everything changed. I couldn't stop replaying her words, her voice low and vulnerable, the way she had looked at me with an intensity that felt both inviting and frightening. I knew, without a doubt, that she wanted more than advice, but I was torn. Every part of me wanted to reach out, to bridge the distance, yet another part cautioned restraint. The age difference, societal expectations, and the fear of overstepping boundaries pressed down on me like a weight I couldn't shake. It was in these moments of hesitation that I realized how deeply she had affected me. I found myself studying her in ways I hadn't allowed myself to study anyone before. The subtle curve of her lips when she smiled, the way her eyes softened when she spoke about something close to her heart, the warmth that radiated from her even in ordinary gestures. Every detail seemed magnified, every glance charged with possibility, and yet I hesitated. Am I reading too much into this? Is this dangerous? She, too, was careful. Her gestures, once casual, now carried a quiet tension. Sometimes she would lean slightly closer, brushing against me in ways that were just shy of intentional. Sometimes she would laugh softly at a comment I made, letting her hand linger near mine, her fingers just a breath away from touching mine. Every time, my heart would skip a beat, a warning and a temptation all at once. The slow burn between us was no longer subtle. It was undeniable, yet forbidden by our own minds. We spent time together in shared spaces where silence spoke louder than words. Sitting side by side on a couch, the faint heat of her presence pressing close, or standing near a window while she described something from her past, I felt a pull toward her I couldn't ignore. My hand itched to reach for hers. My gaze longed to hold hers just a moment longer, but the hesitation remained, a barrier built from reason and fear. I remember one particular moment when she brushed her fingers over a stack of papers and our hands accidentally touched. The warmth that shot through me was both thrilling and terrifying. I caught myself retreating slightly, masking the racing pulse in my chest, afraid that if I allowed myself to lean in, I wouldn't stop. And yet, in her eyes, I saw a reflection of my own longing, a silent acknowledgement that we both knew the danger, but neither of us wanted to step back completely. For the audience, this part is essential. They should feel the tension crackling in every near touch, the hesitation that makes each glance and brush of skin electric. It's a dance of restraint, a slow burn that builds anticipation, making viewers ache alongside the narrator and sense the depth of desire that neither character can fully admit. By the end of this section, the stage is set for the turning point. The attraction is undeniable, the emotional stakes high, and the tension at its peak. Viewers should feel that next, something will give, a moment where walls come down, vulnerability is embraced, and the slow burn romance begins to blaze into something unavoidable. Everything changed in that single, unguarded moment. After weeks of lingering glances, subtle touches, and conversations heavy with unspoken meaning, the distance between us finally collapsed. We were together in a quiet, familiar space, perhaps the soft glow of evening sunlight spilling across a living room, or the muted hum of a city outside a cafe window. She was sitting close to me, the air between us charged with anticipation, and for the first time, there was no hesitation in her eyes. She reached out first, almost shyly, brushing my hand with hers. The contact was light, tentative, yet it carried a weight far beyond its physicality. I felt warmth flood my chest, a pulse of certainty that all my previous fears had been leading to this moment. She looked at me, and I realized she had been waiting, just as hesitant, just as conflicted, and yet, just as ready. Words weren't necessary. Every glance, every breath, every slight shift of her body spoke volumes. I could feel the tension in her shoulders melt as she leaned in just slightly, the faint scent of her perfume enveloping me. I, too, leaned closer, drawn not only to her warmth but to the vulnerability she had so carefully concealed until now. Our proximity was intimate yet respectful, a delicate acknowledgement of the connection that had grown over time. There was a pause, a long, quiet moment where the world seemed to shrink around us. She finally spoke, her voice low and soft. "I didn't come here just for advice. I wanted you." Her words were a confession, a surrender of the heart I had been silently longing to hear. I felt the weight of them, the gravity and honesty in every syllable. I responded with the gentlest of reassurances, my hand finding hers, fingers interlacing naturally, as though they had always belonged together. This moment was more than desire, it was recognition. We acknowledged the weeks of subtle tension, the hesitations, the almost touching moments, and we allowed ourselves to step past them. It was a turning point not only in our relationship, but in the story itself, where the slow burn romance became tangible, real, and mutual. Every accidental brush of skin, every lingering gaze, every whispered confession from before now made sense. The spark that had been simmering quietly had become a steady flame. For the audience, this scene must feel like catharsis. The tension that has been building, hesitation, fear, unspoken longing, finds its release in a moment that is tender, respectful, and charged with emotion. The subtle physicality, the handhold, the leaning closer, the gentle brush of hair or shoulder, creates intimacy without crossing boundaries, keeping the story YouTube safe while still deeply romantic. By the end of this part, viewers should feel the emotional climax. The characters have acknowledged their desires and vulnerabilities. The slow burn has blossomed into something unmistakable, and the path toward emotional resolution is clear. This is the point where the audience can lean back, heart racing, knowing the connection is real, mutual, and profoundly affecting. The days after our turning point felt surreal, as if the world had shifted just slightly, tilting to make room for something entirely new between us. There was no dramatic declaration, no sudden gesture that changed everything in an instant. Instead, it was quiet, deliberate, and infinitely tender, the kind of intimacy that comes from years of understanding, trust, and unspoken connection. We had crossed the boundary from hesitant longing to acknowledged desire, and now the question wasn't if, but how we would move forward together. We spent time in those small, ordinary moments that suddenly carried extraordinary meaning. Sitting side by side on a couch, our shoulders brushing, fingers occasionally interlacing as if drawn by gravity. Sharing a quiet cup of tea, her hand resting near mine, the warmth of her presence filling the space. The beauty of it wasn't in grand gestures, but in the subtle, unassuming ways we could be together. A gentle touch on the arm, a reassuring squeeze of the hand, a fleeting glance that lingered just a heartbeat too long. These moments told stories more profound than any words could. There was a final conversation, soft and unhurried, where we acknowledged everything: the fear, the hesitation, the years of difference, and the longing that had drawn us inexorably to each other. She spoke with her usual quiet confidence, tempered by vulnerability, and I responded with honesty I had never given to anyone else. We didn't need to over-explain. In the gentle press of her hand against mine, in the way our knees touched under the table, we said everything that needed saying. The resolution wasn't just about romance. It was about understanding, respect, and emotional closeness. For the audience, this part emphasizes that love isn't always about fireworks or dramatic confessions. Sometimes it's about the steady warmth that comes from truly seeing someone, being seen, and allowing each other into that space safely. Every smile, every small laugh, every brush of hair or fleeting hug carries the weight of months of emotion condensed into quiet, deliberate moments. Even as we acknowledged the depth of our connection, there was room for reflection. The age gap, the differences in life experience, and the outside world's opinions could never erase what we had discovered together. But in that quiet space, we were united, not just by desire but by understanding, empathy, and mutual respect. The story closed on that note of security and fulfillment, a slow-burn romance that had reached its emotional peak without ever needing to rush, forcing the audience to feel the satisfaction of connection fully realized. The final sensory details linger in memory: the evening light casting a warm glow on her face, the intertwined fingers resting comfortably in laps, the faint sound of laughter echoing softly in the background, the gentle rhythm of shared breathing. These are the moments that define love in its truest form. Not dramatic, not hurried, but quietly transformative. By the end, the audience should leave with a sense of closure and warmth, hearts full, satisfied by the journey of a connection that began with advice and blossomed into a profound, mutual intimacy. We were together, secure in what we had built, aware of the world beyond, but content in the universe we had discovered in each other's presence. If you felt the tension, the slow-burn romance, and the little moments between them, don't forget to hit that like button. Subscribe for more stories that explore age gap romance, forbidden attraction, and heartfelt connections. And comment below, what moment in the story made your heart race the most?